Hi, good afternoon. This is the inaugural session of the Crafting Careers series that we're starting in the BA Honours program at the National Law School. And for our first session, we have our esteemed guest is Vikram Bhat, who's the director of the BIC, the Bangalore International Centre. And you have read Vikram's very resplendent bio already, but Vikram will talk a little bit about his own journey. He's had a rather interesting journey across different kinds of careers. He'll talk about that, and when we'll have a conversation, and then we'll throw it open to Q&A from the students. Without further ado, Vikram Bhat.
Thank you, Atri, and thank you for having me here. And just a quick disclaimer before I begin, I started my first job before y'all were born. So that is, just take everything I say with a pinch of salt. This is, I think, the most exciting part of life where you're in a longer than normal program where you have, please come in, where you have a chance to really get to know yourself a little bit, which I think this kind of program really, that's the biggest opportunity that it offers. Maybe have the slides. Yeah. Can we go into the full screen mode? Yeah, that's great. So I just wanted to give you a sense of my career and in 5 stages. It's not 5 stages of grief, but it is 5 stages so far, and I'm heading off to a 6th. And the first one was enthusiasm, right? Which was my first job in Bombay. It was such a horrible job, I can't tell you. It was, you all remember Y2K? Yeah, so Y2K was this thing, which was before you were born, that when 99 turned to 2000, people thought the world would end. Because in their wisdom, computer programmers hadn't left 4 digits in many places. So they felt computers wouldn't know कि ये 2000 हो रहा है कि 1900 हो रहा है, and there would be lots of failures in computer. So they hired minions like me by the dozens, and they said you have to go into code and replace y को y करना है. And of course, it was not just that much, but and it was really like quite horrible. But I fell in love with computing. I started enjoying that world, and the internet was just breaking out. I felt, yeah, इसमें कुछ कर सकते हैं, मजा आएगा. And I applied to grad school, and that's New York City, my favorite place in the world. And this is a later photograph, but it felt the same way, where you going in, and I got my grad degree at computer science, and then I worked in tech, largely in the financial sector, for about 4 years after that, including NYU. And which was, I think the driver there was enthusiasm, because you're working for the first time. It's just amazing. It's kind of like first love, actually. The second was, ठीक है, काम कर लिए, अब थोड़ा पैसा बनाते हैं, right? Like, just like, this can't be the thing. And, in the US anyway, that's the driver, like where I was staying at the time. And the reason I picked this photograph, first of all, it's stretched because I don't know how to make a portrait photo look nice in this. So I'm revealing my age. But I picked it for the tie, because what I did was, my last job in tech was writing trading strategies for stockbrokers. And I used to love their ties. These brokers used to all wear these sharp ties, and I was like, wow, aisa banna hai. And I went there, and I met one of my clients who had taken a shine to me, and I convinced him, just make me a trader. Let me take it was just basically a licensing exam at that time. And I said, do that. I'll do all the tech on the desk, but let me start trading. Let me talk to clients, and I'll figure it out. And he said, if you don't figure it out, you'll get fired. Like, we can't have overhead on that. And I said, chalo, chance le lenge. I did that. I had a very successful career in the financial markets not very successful career in the financial markets. Till 2008. And I used to have many ties like that, which was sort of why I put this picture. But what interestingly happened in that period is that I started studying philosophy. That was a big mistake. So, how many of you have seen The Matrix? Okay, so you'll get the joke. So I made the mistake of taking the red pill, right? And so then, as it turns out, uh, I lost all interest in corporate work. And I said, okay, let me redefine what my life will be, what my be, and who I will be through it. And so, which brings us to third stage. I think you're blocking the, which was empathy, right? I felt um, that I had to serve, I had to somehow be of service to this world and hopefully alleviate pain in some way. And I came to Bangalore, which was a great decision. I love living here uh, from time to time. And I chose to become a teacher. So I taught at a low income school here called Parikrama. And that is a picture from that school. That boy's name is Deepak. And funny story, this was my second experience as a teacher, second classroom. Deepak was so nervous in class that he had soiled himself. And the kids were making fun of him. That's me trying to convince him to go change his pants. Like, let me help him change his pants. He did agree, and then he's now doing quite well in the IT services space. But that was my third phase, and that continued. I went deep into that. I got a B.Ed at Christ, which was really fun. Christ is not a great college in that sense. It is. I think it's a great college if you're old. If you're young, it's a horrible college. But if you're old, it's a really good college because they have a lot of stuff going on. And when you're old, you don't care about grades and stuff like that. So you can just go do what you want. But I did a B.Ed at Christ, and then I was the vice principal of a school here in Bangalore on Double Road, and I ran that. So that was my whole arc in education, and I felt that empathy that I felt for children, and it continues today. I felt that was the work I wanted to do. But of course, when you take the red pill, you kind of start seeing different things over time, and that brings us to phase number 4, which is idealism. I felt I was lucky enough to be connected to the gentleman in the picture. His name is Manish Sisodia. He was the education minister of Delhi, and they were doing some fantastic work in schools, which continues today, thankfully, where I got connected to him through a curriculum that we were working on called the happiness curriculum. And he asked me to come join his team, and I worked with his team for 4 years. And it was probably the most fun 4 years I've had in my life in terms of learning how government works, learning how scale can happen how change can happen at scale, and really what a difference good politicians can make if we have the right people in the right places, right? But of course, as we know, that story didn't end so well. And my parents live here. My wife is a doctor and she works in Bangalore. So I had to come back anyway. And the work in Delhi anyway took a very, very bad turn. So I had to leave. But which brings me to stage number 5, which is curiosity. So I was in this phase 3 years ago, where I wasn't clear what I wanted to do next, but Delhi was over, so I couldn't do that, and there was no way of doing that kind of work in Bangalore. So I said, let me just take a break, in a sense, and just let's see what emerges. And this role at the Bangalore International Centre came up. I got connected to the doctor. I have no background or skills at that time to do the job, but I made a bet on my curiosity. I felt it was a great opportunity to learn something about a field which I knew nothing. And I just doubled it. And it has been an amazing 2.5-year journey. I'm transitioning out. Tomorrow is my last day at BIC, as a matter of fact. But the interesting thing is that I don't know how many of you guys have seen this movie called Midnight in Paris. Anyone seen it? Okay. It's a Woody Allen film. You must watch it. It's a great film. So the protagonist is a writer who has writer's block. I'm just not going to give away too much of the plot line, but he's a protagonist who has writer's block. He's in Paris and he's walking around and not sure where to go with it. He just gets into a cab absentmindedly, and the cab turns out to be a time portal. And it takes him into the 1920s, where he hangs out with Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and all these people, right? And he's having these deep conversations with them, and he comes back into the real world through the cab, and then he's able to write again. keep telling my wife Rajni that BIC feels like that kind of role, because every day you meet a thinker or an artist of the highest caliber, and you know, if you just learn to keep your mouth shut, a lot of it rubs off on you. So so it's been incredible the number of people I've had the privilege of meeting and learning from. You know, that hypothesis is definitely worked out. Okay, where does this leave us? Because you know, Atreus called me here with the expectation of I'll give you some gyan. Otherwise, I will not get coffee, I suppose, afterwards. So I have to give you some gyan. Takeaway to kuch chahiye. Which is, you know, this is the, if you all don't follow this, you must go watch it. There's a website called Zen Pencils. It's one of the coolest websites you'll find. It has incredibly um, profound thinkers all over history, all over the, like, not just like they're from the arts, like Bruce Lee is one of them, like all kinds of people, right? And he illustrates them beautifully. So you'll really, it's a nice rabbit hole to go down. And so, you know, just the question, this is a Thurman quote, Howard Thurman's quote, where he says, ask yourself, don't ask what the world wants of you. That's the preceding line. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because the world needs, what the world needs is people who have come alive. I think that's the real hypothesis, and that's sort of what I want to leave you with, and then we'll open it up. I think we can dig out a little bit more in our Q&A, but this is the thought I want to leave you with, even post the talk, and maybe for at least a few more days after this. Thank you so much, and over to Atrey.
We're circulating a sheet for you to write thank you to our guests. So that sheet will come around to you. Please sign and write whatever you want to write. Yeah. So there's many things there. My first simple question is, a lot of people in your first horrible job would get stuck in it for the next 40 years, and you didn't. What made that break? How did you take that decision, that jump, that this is a horrible job, I can do it, I'm rather good at it, but I won't do it for the rest of my life? What drove that decision?
So the first job, and I would say the first few jobs that I did, right, even in tech and leading up to the financial sector job, was you kind of wanted to find the middle ground of, like, that illusion of going upward, in a sense. Like, so you're at least making more money. I was moving to the US, so that already felt like a step up. But the idea that it's hard to take those risks early in your career. So in a sense, the only thing I would say is you have the most time before your first job, right? When, you know, and that determines a lot of everything. So choose that carefully. And I mean, when I was growing up, my parents had just separated, and I was kind of like the earning member of the family. So it it was a big deal. The amount of money I was making, it was really a big deal. And so whatever decision I chose from there, I would have to do it in a way where that was non-negotiable, right? Like that had to keep happening, and then jo karna hai karo. And so that's the sort of thinking early on, where and you know, even for people who stayed on, you know, I feel like what happens in most jobs, and you know, some exceptions may be there, but it gets less horrible. You know, you stay on somewhere, you know, you get trusted, you get more responsibility, things open up, right? You know, life changes. It's just you just have to wake up and face the next day. That's basically it. But if you want to change, I mean, I think changing in your sector now is quite easy. Like, you know, you can kind of find, and you can have some mental model which says, okay, this is an uptick from where I was, and kind of try and figure out what that means to you. Sometimes it's a change of geography. Sometimes it's more money. Sometimes it's going and living where love is. They all kind of work out. Yeah.
So two related questions. You're saying risk and security, in this case, financial security or other kinds of security. Risk taking and security are not opposed phenomenon. You're saying that. Can you say a little bit more about that? And secondly, you're also saying that changing sectors within the sector is somewhat easy. changing across sectors is difficult. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Right. That's a great question. I mean, I think without risk, we get bored, right? Like, so some amount of risk is absolutely necessary in anything we do. And I think the best articulation or framing of that I learned in my work as a trader in financial services, where whatever decision you take has repercussions. You have to just make sure that you've done the math for the downside. Like if you are wrong, where do you end up, right? And that's not a hard thing to do, by and large. It's quite doable. It's much harder when you are shifting careers. But even there, I'll come to it in a second. But there, I think the mistake I see most people make is that say when you're young like this, you have a very, let's put it in another way, in your own sense, don't compare it with anyone else, but in your own life and your own journey, your ability to take risk is usually higher when you're younger, right? Like there are less variables. And in theory, it should either stay the same or get better. You should take more risk as you get older because A, you're more knowledgeable and you're making more money. All these things largely are true. But I see the opposite. People become more and more and more risk averse, and they kind of stay in situations where they're unhappy because they just have misread the risk. And so that's the sort of thing I'd say. Just get good at understanding what happens if I'm wrong about this and having a sense of that. In changing careers entirely, and this is based on the assumption that you were reasonably successful in what you were doing, and then you're making an active choice to change your career. There, it's actually quite interesting because if you fail there, which the likelihood of failing is quite high, you're trying something new and you really don't have the basis for it, but you'll still have your old job back. Nobody, because you were good at it, and that never goes away. And that is something people always misunderstand. They think, oh, I won't be able to go to that. It's just about a little bit about not being egoistic about it, like just saying, okay, I failed, I have to go back. And I suppose that's sort of the biggest thing to take away is how do you build a good relationship with failure, so you're able to do that. But if you change careers like completely, that old job is always there. It never goes away. Is my hypothesis.
You often talked about, in our earlier conversations, and today you just mentioned the word failure. You've always talked about the need to attack the ego and how much of an encumbrance the ego becomes in one's journey through life, personal and professional. Without getting too philosophical, can you say the significance of what your philosophy of attacking the ego is and what its relationship to failures are?
I love the disclaimer. Without getting too philosophical, we want them to come back to class tomorrow. What I would say is, and ego is a big word. I just, we all have this back talk kind of going on in our head, something that's chattering back to us. I think it's good to find a way to master that. I think 2 or 3 things work, right? Like I think one is have that practice in something else, something which is low stakes. So uh, uh, I used to run, and so that was my low stakes thing where you just trying to. So it kind of is a way to teach you perseverance, right? Like how do you do something that, like my wife, she crochets, and most of her early work was quite rubbish, but she keeps it, which is a sore point in our marriage. But the fact is that she persisted, and now she's reasonably good at it. And it is something that she does. And I don't know if, without even knowing it consciously, it transfers into work. That you just have to stick at something for a little while, and there is a sweet spot, right? Like you don't want to do something forever.
So endurance is something that's rather difficult for us to in the classroom or elsewhere as teachers
Yeah.
to to pass on that the need to keep on at something difficult where you don't see quick results. Can you talk about that?
Well, but I think all of these young people have made that choice. They've committed to a 4-year program without knowing what it is, and it's reasonably open-ended. And odds are most of them are going to finish the 4 years, and that's an act of perseverance in itself. I think we sometimes make it uh, too high stakes. That's one part of it. But the second thing I was going to say about that whole piece is to again, I'll come back to running because it's sort of a good example, but or any other form of physical activity, you have to learn to enjoy that discomfort a little bit, or at least learn to live with it. So you won't enjoy it, but how do you sit with it, right? And that I think sometimes uh, very early on in your life, perhaps you won't have it. You know, where I am at today, like it's almost second nature. You have to learn how to just build that muscle thing. It will be uncomfortable. It will be uncomfortable. It's like, you know, if you fly and there's turbulence, right? You know, your first thought is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then you kind of taper out a little bit. And then you say, okay, it's going to come again. I'll just get used to it. And then it's somehow that feeling passes, right? Like, and I think you have to find a way to process that discomfort. And a lot of that discomfort is largely wanting to see the future today. That I don't know what's going to happen. I just want to see it today. And that's what the discomfort is.
Comparable story. I don't like going down very steep escalators because my head kind of spins and I kind of get a little bit sick. So my way of going down, you know, like this London, New York kind of like really deep escalators, is to keep looking at my shoes. So I don't look further down into the depths of that escalator, which is going down into the inferno, but I just only look at my shoes. And that probably mirrors some of what you're saying. My last question before I hand over to Anandita is how two things. What is a career for you, and what would you have to say to them in terms of how to construct or think about a career at their stage?
I mean, this is interesting because thanks to this talk, I had to do a little research and come. So I was, you know, there's this idea now that you have a portfolio of careers. You don't have just one career which you do over a period of time. Uh, I think the only commitment you need to make to yourself is what was on screen. Like you're doing something that makes you feel alive and excited about it. And it can be the most boring thing for someone else. Like I think that's the mistake we often make. I know a lot of people who actually love accounting and things that would like I would cut my hand off if I had to do it. But that's sort of one way of thinking of it. But the other one is that you just really commit to getting better at it. And if it gets to a point where you um, you are at a stage where you feel okay, this is now not going to add to my life, and I feel like I want to do something interesting and pivot, then you could do five different things. And I can tell you from my own lived experience that it all makes sense in hindsight. When you look back, it will make sense. And it's a very uncle-like thing to say, but it does. Trust me on this one. And so the role I'm going to now to go do, it actually brings that together. And I couldn't have, even if I take some of the smallest things I've done in my life, which I thought, yeah, why am I doing this? This is just such not me. It now comes together. Like it kind of starts making sense in the rearview mirror. So I think so. Think of your life if you must, and it doesn't have to be five or six, whatever. The number is irrelevant. I think you could have two or three really good careers and just figure it out. And most people do two anyway, right? Like they get to their 50s or 60s and they say, okay, I want to pivot. I'm done making money and
over to Ladakh.
over to Ladakh, exactly. But the one thing I would say is, which didn't come up, and I think it's a really important thing for young people to know, is that you must have a healthy equation with money. So figure that out, right? Like, I mean, I think one of the things that philosophy helped me do was figure that out. And I think that is the greatest gift I got from my teacher, that I realized what was my number in a sense. And it's more important than assets is what's your cash flow number? Like how much money do you need a month for perpetuity? And if you can kind of figure that out. And for a lot of us, the job is that way of providing that monthly cash flow, right? Which it's foolish to think any of us don't that any one of us don't work for money. But it's important to frame that correctly. And then once you use the first part of your career or whichever part of your career, and so I've had this discussion one-on-one with a lot of people. Um, you have to spend, in my view, 10 years of your life making money. You have to figure out where those 10 years come, right? And if you do it at a stretch and you compound it, sure, it adds more value. But you have to spend some part of your adult live life, unless you come from money, which is great, then it doesn't hold true. But if you have to make your own way in the world, I think over the course of your life, a solid decade you have to give to making money. There's no way out of that. And then the rest of your time is yours to play.
And but that can be done in diverse ways also.
It can be. It can be very much, very much. In fact, like if I were to just again come from a personal space, like the last, my all my work in education has largely been as close to pro bono as you can think of, right? Like I'm lucky to be married to someone who hasn't questioned her life's decision and uh, continues to kind of do her work with passion. And we're a single family, single income family in that sense. But the role I'm now about to take is with a big foundation and the salary is decent. So it comes full circle. You never know when that period will come, but you have to kind of build that the thinking around it if I'm making sense. But because very often we want the money when you're early in your life, and after a while you're like, what's the point of having it when I'm 50? So that's sort of a dichotomy you have to figure out.
I just have one question to get you to flip the chair that you're sitting in. My question for you is sort of less as Vikram who's gone through these stages, but as Vikram who's had the enviable position of being in these different stages and being at the other end of it, having young people come to you as prospective applicants or people who want to work with you. So I love the way you defined, we describe the stages of ambition and empathy and passion. These are things that you don't typically put on a CV, right? So when someone comes to you saying, I'm ambitious, I'm empathetic, I have great passion for the job, it depends on how the relationship evolves from there, whether the person gets the job or not in the first place. So one question sort of is, what do you look for when you interact with young people who come to the various kind of positions you've been in and the spaces of work that you've been in? What have you found yourself looking for? What are you struck by? What are the interactions that stayed with you? So I'll start with that.
I think the thing that has always, and it served me well, whenever I hire, I look for two things. I look for, something I just spoke about. It's just a spark in someone's eyes, right? Like that they want, like they've woken up this morning. You want to feel that, right? Like you are awake and you're in front of you. I mean, it's not, you think it's reasonably trivial, but it's not. Right? Like it is not as, and it's actually not.
If the CV were not very great, you would give.
Yeah. In fact, I never go up. I think that CV stuff is done. Like I think it's just a way of getting in the room, right? Like now, and if you're in the room, you're there. But I think it's a lesson for us in general. Like it's how did I show up here today, right? Like I could have either shown up saying, okay, I'm just going to go through the 5 stages of brief and then open it up here and just sit here and talk, or I come like, man, I want to at least see someone in this saying, how do I do this, right? Like how do I flip someone's thinking? And you show up with that way, right? Like as what one says, we are fully present. So I look for that, right? Like how present you are as a person. But then the more important thing I look for is, do you show up every day? Like, which is really the only game in town. Like you have to, and that's why in most roles, you can't get a sense of that in an interview as much, but you can push them through those, like a little bit of those situations by asking about earlier jobs and stuff. But more importantly, it's in the first 90 days that you get to know anything about anyone. That's enough, right? And that's enough. Those notice periods or those probation periods are there everywhere. So it's like, how do you show up? But how do you show up every day? That's it.
Kind of do the mundane stuff and not get bored by the usual kind of working of the wheel, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that's overdone too. Like I feel like we feel like there's too much mundane stuff in the world, where there is a fair amount of it. But I feel like, if you just show up every day, there's enough good stuff in every day too. Like it's like it's all a mix in the end. But I think you have to show up every day. That's the main thing. Like, day after day, and I think I don't know if you all have heard this Roger Federer Dartmouth speech. He gave the speech, a commencement speech at Dartmouth, where he talks about, and let's do this as a straw poll if you all want to, like Roger Federer's career winning percentage is about 80%, roughly, right? And Anyone wants to hazard a guess how many points he has won in his career over his opponent? The guess costs nothing. And it's hint, it's between 50 and 100. It's between 50 and, you're right, it's 55%. So on average, he wins only 55% of the points, but he wins 80% of the matches. And a lot of that he just put down to this idea that it's just a point. Prove it. Yeah, it's an incredible fact. You wouldn't have thought of it, and it blows your mind, right? I played tennis, so I kind of know it, but when he said it the way he did, then that's how you put bad days behind you. You just say, I'm showing up the next day. It's 55% and then you'll win 80% of your match. So that's sort of the thing.
One last, and then we can open it up, is that you're speaking to a room of social science majors,
Yeah.
right? And you started your career the other end
Yeah.
as computer science and as an engineer, and so but then the turning point, interestingly for you, is when you said you took the time off to study philosophy.
Yeah, I didn't take the time off. I took time off because I studied.
Okay,
So
so both.
yeah.
So I guess the question really is again, I'm curious as to what did studying outside of your discipline perhaps, or what your training,
Yeah.
what did that give you? And again, what kind of critical thinking does a social science, do you think a social science base perhaps provides that you maybe felt like you didn't have in the undergraduate and graduate training that you did before your first job, and that would have perhaps helped in hindsight or something to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question, but I'll try and answer it without being trite about it. I think the hardest thing was that, or the greatest privilege you all have, is that whenever you're studying, the lens of the human experience is never too far away. When I was studying, like, you just had no idea what you were doing it for, which is that dissonance that comes from that is really hard to process. And the younger you are, you still kind of do it. But as you get older, that's what really makes people unhappy. That I don't even know who I'm doing it for or what I'm doing it for. Once you kind of figure those things out. And then I think the privilege I actually started learning more about that when I went to teaching and I taught history, which was, I thought, one of the funnest experience. I used to hate history as a kid. And, but, at that time, I wanted to take the lowest. It was kind of like a lazy decision because I wanted to take the course that needed the least prep. So history became that course. But so you just go read up and go tell a story. What's so hard about that, right? But of course, my thinking changed since. But it got me really interested in sort of the human experience, how that shapes, and we forget that, right? Like, we forget that. And now I'm going to get a little philosophical, but like the idea that you get this incredible, it's such a great lottery we win by being born and having this reasonably comfortable life. And if you don't process that experience from the lens of what a great human life is, I think you miss out on something fundamental, right? Like, of this chance. And I think that's where, and whether or not you see it with this profundity early on, it doesn't matter. But the base is getting set. For me, I had to go find that. But if you've studied the great thinkers or, sort of the idea of inequity or justice, if you've talked about this or heard about this in classrooms in a meaningful way from someone who has A, lived experience, but B, also empathy for it, I think that stays with you. Somewhere it'll come out. And I can bet this happens a lot in school. When we're in, like, K-12 or K-10, you have teachers who bring the human experience into your life beautifully, right? Like, and some of them we can never forget. And I think somehow in the college level, particularly when you go into the sciences, it gets attenuated, I suppose.
Open for questions, but did you want to have a last question? No. Maybe I'll ask a last question, which I thought I'd ask, but we were running out of time, but I'll still ask it. You've been a leader in many walks of life. What does it take to become a leader?
Miss India type question हो गया. Sure. I think even that notion is changing a lot, right? Frankly, like I think the way younger people perceive leadership is so different from what we were when I was your age, how I looked at leadership, and it is really in a sense a challenge for people like us because uh, I have to work with people who are so young that there's like so much difference in our lived reality. And so I would say like the most important sort of timeless thing about being a leader is I feel a really high degree of consistency to some to the cause or whatever. You just show up, which has, it's kind of the show up example, but you're doing it very consistently. The second is there is again this is like a great modeling between teachers and leadership, right? Like the difference between your professed values and lived values are as little as possible. There'll never be zero. We all aim to be better humans than we are, but that's another really important thing. But the third, I think, is which more and more I'm starting to come around to is just authenticity and caring, right? Like you have to just really care about the person who's on your team and you're authentic about it. Uh, that okay, we got to get this done, but I'm also mindful of what you're going through, and that doing that well, but authentically, I think is what people.
We'll open it out for questions. Thanks, Vikram, and we'll take some comments or questions from the
Yeah,
students.
comments are welcome too. Huh?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an intelligent question. You can just say, I think. Want to use the mic? No.
Sir, I had two questions for you. So, firstly, from your experiences, you mentioned that you changed your career path multiple times. So, how did you muster up the courage to be able to make that drastic of a shift? And secondly, again, from your experience, do you think someone who is looking to pursue a career in the humanities would require financial or data related skills in today's job market, in today's world?
It's a great question. I'll do the second part first because it's easier in a sense. I think it's really important to because especially because you'll have the flexibility, just always have a proportion of skills which have demand in the marketplace, right? And find that balance of something that either you love or at least don't hate, right? In that middle ground of it, but make sure that it's there and it's marketable so that you don't have to go. And I mean, I think it's such a great time to be alive because you could do it from your living room, right? Like now, you don't need to show up at an office to make money. Interesting time that we live in. So, but absolutely, and that part of your brain, I would suggest just keep it alive to keep reskilling. You know, I do believe it's a part of the brain which you can keep retraining. So just do that as an easy one. So definitely, and in college, build that muscle. Like how do you do that, right? Well, the courage one is harder. I mean, it is. There's no answer I can give you which might work for you, right? Like I think it's a very personal journey. But I think if I were to be honest, um, we've all experienced it. That you're afraid and you don't do something, then you're afraid and you do something, and usually the first what do you call the first demon wins. But but we've all had lived experiences where we were afraid, but we went ahead and did it. And the way to do it, particularly, I wish I'd started this younger, but I do it quite regularly now. You journal about it, you record it in some way that your brain remembers that it happened. And it happened to me, and I did it. So when the next time it happens, it doesn't seem as intimate. It comes down by one notch, and then over time, I mean, it's a really good example is um, uh, any divers here? Anyone who's dived?
There's a diver.
So that's the ultimate example, right? Especially if you go from the highest platform, that knot never goes away. When you ask any diver, because you're standing there and it's just like it's the same feeling. The first feeling is coming from your reptilian brain. You're not gonna, but you learn how to live with that not. And so that's sort of the training that you give yourself. I'm not sure if it gives you any answers, but journaling maybe is a easy, practical way to do it.
What advice would you like to give to those who want to work in the education sector? What mindset should we go with?
Don't do it.
Okay.
No, I think the figure out your relationship with children first. I mean, a lot of people misunderstand that. They overestimate how much they love children. No, seriously. Yeah, but I don't think, yeah, but I feel like no, but I think in whatever field you work, right, wherever you go, if you go into a policy space, I feel like part of the biggest problems of the world is too many policymakers who are not practitioners or have never been practitioners, right? So if you want to go in education, I would say you have to start in the classroom. Understand that interaction deeply, right? As I am trying to do now. And context is everything there, right? But there, I think most people, I say this only because I've worked at Teach for India and I know a lot of fellows who I've talked to. And one of the most difficult things for them is that, man, I don't really like children so much. Like, because it's hard, like, and they test you every day. And their energy levels are always going to be higher. And, it's just a really hard problem. So, but I would say it's one of the most satisfying things to do because you become a lifelong learner. I think it makes you that, right? Like once you've done that thinking early on, you really start enjoying that frame because I'm sure I'm going back with things today which I will go process, and that's the beauty of space. Like that's the learning process in general. Follow-up question, please go ahead.
Since I have also worked in the NGOs, so we have to do one internship in Feb. So I wanted to ask, how can we as students contribute and make the most out of working on the grassroots level?
I think don't get that far ahead. Just go in an area that excites you, and just really pick up, like if it's waste management or it's whatever. Yeah, so many NGOs, so much work to be done. So just pick something that really excites you. How long is it? 2-3 months or what? 1 month, 20 days. Yeah. So by the time you figure out where the toilets are in the office, only your internship is over. But just go into a space which excites you. So at least you'll meet interesting people. They could be contacts for life in a sense, and really, yeah, don't overthink that part. I know overthinking is a specialty for people your age, but don't try to think that how will it work out or how will it help someone. I think the most important thing to think of is what will I learn from it, and will I go there excited? Yeah, can you raise your hand so I can see who's the question asking?
Oh, there.
I am not in the BA batch, I'm the BLB batch.
Okay.
But I just want to let me talk.
Yeah.
Gaurav.
Got it.
And it's a very philosophical question regarding the comic you showed about ask yourself what makes you come alive. I want to know what you exactly mean by coming alive itself, because like on a very normative scale, it can also mean like just earning enough to survive. But at the same time, it can also mean like exciting. I'm not sure what makes people come alive.
Okay. Sorry, Gaurav, you said? Yeah. Gaurav, like what interesting hobby do you have? Or not interesting, what hobby do you have? Or like, do you paint? What do you do? Right? Like if I were to ask you, like where you don't think of it as work. Tell me one thing.
There was this volunteering thing I did in my first year at this NGO called Make a Difference, where I had to go teach at orphanages.
Sure. No, but that's still, I think, at your brain is kicking in. But where I feel like just pick something like playing football.
I play instruments.
You play music. Excellent. So I think the question then the way you want to frame that is whenever playing your preferred instrument, and you're doing it well, there's a state of flow that you're in, right? And that's what that means. Like coming alive means you're in a state of flow where you're not. And now, since you asked a philosophical question, I'm going to serve it back to you. That you are not thinking about the past or the future. That is what that means in my limited definition. That you're able to actually experience that state again and again, where you're not looking at your phone, you're not going forward in time, or you're not thinking about what happened. You're just in the moment, and that is what you kind of want to do as much as possible.
So you mentioned something about, hi, my name is Sakshita, I'm in the BA batch. You mentioned something about the importance of making money for at least 10 years of your life. When do you think that these 10 years should come in? Should they come in the beginning of your career? Because this is when most people are telling you that, you should hustle and everything. Or should they come in a later phase of your life? Because
yeah, this is why I'm a little worried about giving this kind of gyan, because it gets prescriptive. Okay, so नहीं आपने कहा था दिन में 2 बार दवाई लेनी है तो नहीं but what I'm saying is I don't have a great answer for you because but again I did it in my first 10 years and it worked out reasonably well. It if I were to be practical, it's better to front end it just so that you have more of your life to live. But the risk there is what I was saying earlier, that your risk aversion goes higher and higher. So to give up something, so even giving up an idea of yourself, whether it's an idea of your professional self, takes practice. So the sooner you start it, the better. Like, so if you wait too long, odds are like you won't be able to break the cycle. That's my limited point.
a follow-up question. You said that you did it in the beginning of your career. Didn't you ever feel like, okay, I'm wasting the most probably exciting years of my life just chasing money or chasing something that maybe I don't even want to pursue in the future?
No, but that's the point I was making. Like, I really enjoyed my trading job. I loved it. I loved every part of it. I love the perks. I love the business class flights. I loved all of it. So there's nothing about it that I didn't. And I enjoyed the intellectual kick also. It was like a really hard problem. It's just, I think somewhere when I started studying Vedanta for a while, sort of the bottom fell out. Like I couldn't figure out what is this for. And because I'd grown up so middle class, I really didn't have like this. I wish I did, but I didn't have this this ability to spend money. Like you just don't have it. So then what is that all adding up to? And so those kind of questions start coming. So which is why I feel like you can find, but do it at some point so that it's not like earning money is important. Like I don't want to dismiss that, right? Like I feel like a lot of people who have lived lives like me say, do you follow your passion and all that? And it could turn out quite badly. So you have to kind of have a backup plan.
My question is, what approach should a person with social anxiety take to overcome their fears and these anxieties and gain confidence in their career?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, but sure. I feel like after a while you feel like a Superman. You can just ask, कुछ भी पूछो यार मैं बता दूँ. But no, yeah, I feel like there's a thin line there, to be honest. Like I think some of it has to be done by a specialist, but I think more importantly, really build strong friendships. I think that nothing tops that in life, and then bet on it. Like like really stay in touch, do those things, because I think what will help you overcome that is safe spaces, right? Like when you enter safe spaces, that anxiety automatically goes away. And then once you know that feeling, our brain is good enough to find ways to replicate it. And there are physical practices around it too. But I feel like the most important thing is knowing that you're emotionally sorted. Like I have these connections in my life which I can go back to. I have not found a better way than that to cope with it.
We can take 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, Shraddha.
Yes, you have touched upon reading philosophy a few times, and you also mentioned how like reading philosophy helped make a different, a better relationship with money, with finance, which was honestly a very surprising insight for me. So it would really be helpful for me if, for one, you can like expand on how reading helps make a better relationship with money, and for two, how do we engage in philosophy in such a way that has such a impact on our way of thinking, which has such an impact of knowing more about ourselves.
So, yeah, I want to really, really qualify this. Reading does not give you anything unless you go practice it, right? Like I think, in fact, in this last role at BIC, I've had the privilege of knowing deep practitioners, I suppose, on both sides. People who read a lot and then write a lot about it and kind of put that to the test, and people who really use art as a medium without they give you no gyan. You just get on a stage and do it day in day out. And they do that. But I think if you go back to the Zen pencil thing, which is my favorite thing to go back to, there's a fabulous Theodore Roosevelt quote and corresponding illustration, which says that the credit belongs to the man in the arena and the woman in the arena by extension, which is that you have to put yourself out there, right? Otherwise, reading doesn't help, right? Like, how do you? So you take, and the reading is a great way to, I think, live in different times and get exposed to ideas. But then how do you make it your own? I think you have to go put yourself out there. So if I had this insight that, oh, money is not everything, I had to actually then find a way to give that up for a while and see, okay, is that hypothesis even true? Or do I just become really miserable, right? Like, and it's an important thing to kind of do because so much of what happens, and which is that earlier dissonance I was talking about. We read an idea, and it's obviously these great ideas resonate because they're great, right? But I think what you want is in some way to close the gap between what you are living and where that idea has inspired you. And so that I think is the thing. So that reading must translate to some jumping off a cliff, some version of jumping off.
Dinesh had a question? No, someone there had a question?
There's a question here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sir. My name is Tejal. Not a question, but a comment. I don't know whether I'm right on this, but when asked about what it takes to be a leader, you answered that there are two qualities, right? One is consistency, and the other one is what are the prospects, your prospects of values matching with the values
I think
you
there's
live
a
up
third.
to. So I feel these are the qualities which matter the least in a person because in my life I've seen people with both these qualities and they still don't have that leadership quality because of insecurities, either which make them self-loathing or the exact opposite, which is a narcissist. So how do you think this will like relate to the quality of leadership? Like
So there was a question in the end, but
yeah.
sure, I'll take it. And no, there was a third one also, which was authenticity. But I wanted to come back to the point that I'm not conflating leadership with successful leadership, if that makes sense. Like there are people in the world who become successful as leaders who may not have these values at all, and that we're full of. The president of the United States is a great example of that, right? But I feel like. In the context of what I think Atrey was asking, like how do you become a leader who um, is respected and more importantly, I think remembered, fondly. That is where I was coming from. Like, remembered and I would like to hope fondly. That is the sort of where I was coming from, not from a place of what makes you successful. And that can even be in a small group discussion or group, this, that's what I meant. That I think these ideas of leadership now are changing. Like you just very often it's like a baton, right? Like sometimes I'm the leader, sometimes someone else is, and that.
We take one last question.
The question.
Atlisha, you had a question? Someone there had a hand up. We got to forget who.
Second.
Yes.
I was just wondering what philosophical books did you read? That
Yeah, that at least I don't have to think about it. But sure. So I very quickly, I study a branch of Vedanta, which was my teacher Swami Parthasarthi. His guru was Swami Chinmayananda, who many of you may know. And we started with this very simple 101 kind of book called the Vedanta Treaty, which is where I started. He's since written an even more simplistic book called The Fall of the Human Intellect, which I would highly recommend you all study. Because it's very Socratic, like the ideas are very debatable and testable, I suppose. Yeah. The concept is, and if you want like the literally the Chavani Chap version of it, I'll tell you that we all have this body through which we experience the world. We have this mind through which we experience emotions, and we have an ability. We have this intellect which has the ability to process thought. Now we don't. The first two happen often enough, but we don't develop this intellect strongly enough, and that is sort of the problem. And if once you start engaging with this idea, you develop that more and more, and then that guides your thinking in the world.
Hello, sir. My name is Maisha. I'm from the BA batch. The question that I had for you is that in your speech, you mentioned that you had a desk job which you liked and that made you travel the world. On the other hand, you also taught children in NGOs at the rural level. A lot of times when people try to go into the the sector where people tend to care for other people or teach them, a lot of times people tend to forget themselves. How do you balance living for yourself and then living for other people? I think that's something which I wanted to ask.
Hard problem. Yeah, it's no easy answer. And I think it's also again a personal answer because what is balance for you is not for someone else, and those kind of things. But just in my personal case, if my wife yells at me, I know it's like the balance is out of whack. So just look and listen to the people closest to you. They'll tell you if you're out of whack.
Thank you, Vikram. And there's tea and coffee outside. If you have more questions and if you want to get to know Vikram a little bit more, we'll have 10 or 15 minutes to mill about and have tea and coffee. Please join us.
I've earned my coffee.
Yes, you have earned it. Thank you. Thank you.